Paul, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to start us off. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to acknowledge the students who are here today and the staff and the adults who are all here today. Of course, we have Miss Hall, we have our school board cabinet members, we have Dr. Sue Gallagher from the Children's Services Council. We have many other peoples who were here today. We have our wonderful teachers, we have our wonderful school equity liaisons, and we have some students on the call here as well. So we just like to give you all a huge thank you to everyone that elected to join us for this session today. Our plan is to present for the next 15 to 20 minutes, and then we have a few topics that we'd like to dive a little deeper into. Those topics will include engagement with you, and we hope to be able to entertain some, if not all, of your questions at the end of the presentation. So, a little background on what brought us here today. We were learning about racial equity and social justice in our monthly B2L meetings. And as Sue Gallagher said earlier, racism is in the DNA of our country. After learning about this and reflecting on our own lived experiences, this led us to want to further explore and investigate the inequities that we have learned and witnessed in our own lives. Over the last year, we have conducted interviews with different individuals who are well versed in the subject of education and equities, such as Dr. Sue Gallagher, who we've heard from earlier from CSE, School Board Chair Dr. Rosalind Osgood, David Watkins, the Director of Equity and Diversity for the Broward Schools, and many others. Armed with these conversations and our own research, we have devised a handful of evidence-based recommendations that will help combat the inequities that exist within our schools across Broward County. We students are the customers of the education system and the future of this country. Change begins with us, and we will use our power to create lasting change in our education system. All right, now let's meet the team. During our introductions, each of us will have the opportunity to share what this work means to us personally. I'll go first. My name is Chad Jordan, and I am a junior, rising senior from Fort Lauderdale High School. This work has been so important for me. I've learned a great deal. I've had the privilege of connecting with leaders from across our community and beyond. To me, this work is a place where I can learn and know that my input is valuable. And it has also given me a safe space to talk about these sensitive topics. And it's been one of the best experiences for me. Now let's hear from another participant, Hailey.
Thank you so much, Chad. So good morning, everyone. My name is Hailey McTee, and I am a graduated senior from College Academy, and I will be attending the University of Central Florida next fall. And so for me, this work is a way to show those within our community that we as students want to work towards eliminating inequity. This is a serious problem, and we see it, and we want to do something about it. So next up, we're going to hear from Samantha.
Thank you, Hailey. Good morning, everyone. My name is Samantha Moly, and I am a graduated senior from Flandin High School. I will be attending a four-year university and majoring in nursing. This work to me has been a way to have difficult conversations that we tend to avoid and work towards erasing prejudice and racism. And now we have Yewande.
Thank you, Samantha. Hi, my name is Yewande Shitta-Bey, and I'm a sophomore at Everglades High School, and will be attending College Academy at Broward College this fall. This work to me is an avenue for youth to learn and express what we need to do to eliminate discrimination and prejudice in our schools.
If I could ask everyone if they wish to put their name, school, or affiliation in the chat, we would love to see who we have with us today. Thank you.
Yes, please blow up the chat. We'd love to see where everyone's coming in from. Oh, I see it. I love it. Thank you so much. So while you are all putting that in the chat so we can get to know you a little bit better and see who's here with us, I'm going to continue on and get a little bit more into the details of this. Like Chad said earlier, we hosted interviews with more than a dozen thought leaders in equity and education, and you can see the list of who that is specifically on the slide right here. So during these interviews, we asked each interviewee for 3 recommendations and practical ways to implement those recommendations. Unsurprisingly, we heard many common themes in these recommendations. We also spent a great deal of time reading and reviewing data from articles, research papers, and published documentaries, and this slide can't even fit all of them. On top of that, many of us have received formal training on equity and diversity. So we have received a lot of great information during this process, but we want to be sure that the steps we take are driven by data, especially data from our own district. And we know that the school district has a robust team of people analyzing school and student outcomes. And we would like to see a commitment to the application of predictive data analytics so that we can properly address any inequities in education. Near term, that means that we would like to encourage pilot data studies, analyzing the fundamental questions raised in the recommendations that we will be sharing with you all in a few minutes. And keep in mind, not all of them require specific data points to get started. So some of these projects will begin before we have the specific points to back them up for our district. Longer term, to truly close the achievement gap, we are asking for a commitment to implementing a program like the one at Georgia State University, which has been using predictive data analytics since 2012. That's the correct year. By tracking risk factors, GSU has been able to greatly close the achievement gap for all students and particularly students of color. We need to truly understand the data we have, be able to identify student needs in a more focused way, and to be able to implement the needed interventions more effectively. So we will be doing this via a 4-step process. First, we would like to understand the types of data that we already have and what is being collected now within Broward County Public Schools. It would be helpful to understand more fully the types of data being analyzed. In other words, the data dictionaries that define the categories of data that we already have. Then we hope to have more participation in the use of that data. We're suggesting that in the near term, school officials will be willing to conduct the pilot research studies outlined in this presentation and present progress on those studies quarterly. But long term, we suggest the creation of a team devoted to analyzing equity data points and their correlations. So in other words, the use of predictive data analytics similar to GSU, which we will be sharing a little bit of a podcast, which will better explain how GSU has created this model and their success more fully. So stay tuned. After our presentation, we will dive into that a little deeper. And then we feel that step 3 is very important. Transparent access to equity data for both students and parents. So this might mean that we'll create a page on the Broward County Public Schools website that is updated routinely. All in all, we want to be able to have access to this data so that students, parents, teachers, and everyone within the county can see what is available and see the numbers backing up the recommendations that we have here. Step 4, finally, once we have correlated data points, this is when we would like to see targeted action. We would like to better understand where in the process students are at risk of falling behind, and rather than focusing on factors we cannot change, such as demographics, we suggest focusing on academic metrics that we can change. And these are metrics beyond the traditional academic markers of 3rd grade reading, comprehension, and 8th grade math. So now I will pass it along to Yewande, who will cover our call to action.
Before I go through the call of action, I think it is important to let you know that what we are sharing today is accompanied by a detailed report that we will be finalizing and sharing with school officials in the next 30 days. In a May 2021 education op-ed piece, anthropologist Dr. Micah Pollock said that anti-racism is a collective investment in an improved society. We truly applaud the notable variety and robust efforts to eliminate inequities in education by Broward schools and many community partner agencies, such as the Children's Services Council of Broward. It is paramount, and this is a central point that we hope we can convey clearly, that we recognize how inequities have been intertwined into the very roots of our schooling system. Jane Elliott, an American diversity educator, once said that if you graduated from high school and you aren't a racist, you weren't listening. Our call to action is to conduct data research pilots for the following 3 issues and to invest in our youth-led efforts. We ask that our local education leaders acknowledge that inequities still exist within our school system and act accordingly and with urgency. We, the students, call for a commitment to review and help us help you implement the following recommendations.
So we have decades of research pointing to the need for a more focused and strengthened resources for students. In McKinsey and Company's December 2020 report, COVID-19 and Learning Loss, the report points out how the pandemic has set back learning for all students, but especially students of color. Broward Schools has done a ton of work to create a sense of welcome for students by incorporating culturally responsive teaching practices in the classroom, and we hope to build on this to achieve stronger outcomes. For example, according to ProPublica data, white students are 2.4 times as likely to be enrolled in at least one AP class as Black students. And Broward ranks the lowest 10% in the state of the number of social workers, psychologists, and counselors per 1,000 students. According to a paper published in July 2020 by the National Bureau of Economic Research, tutoring is one of the most versatile and potentially transformative educational tools in use today. The systematic review and meta-analysis published in the MBER report reflect that tutoring programs yield consistent and substantial positive impacts on learning outcomes. Just 3 days ago, Bill Moses from the Kresge Foundation tweeted a Washington Post article stating, "If anyone says college isn't for all, remind them that just 7,000 of the 916,000 jobs added in March went to adults with high school diplomas but no college degree. We want all students to have equal access to higher education opportunities and all the incentives that are regularly offered by the higher education institutions." Evidence from a summer 2017 report from the International Academic Forum titled "Sense of Belonging at School, Defining Attributes, Detriments, and Sustaining Strategies" is one of the many studies clearly showing that student engagement and connection and feeling welcome at school is important. We feel it is a necessary component for students to thrive. This is an easy set of recommendations, so we ask for the following. 1, inventory all the resources available at each school. We will provide the framework. The list should include student clubs, peer mentoring programs, tutoring programs, and known higher education offers and incentives. For a second recommendation, we would like a survey issued to students and parents to ask them where they would like to receive information and share school-specific resources that we have inventoried. And our third recommendation is one of those, why haven't we done this before? And it's investing in the marketing expertise to better communicate opportunities. Speak to students where they live through Instagram, TikTok, other social media platforms, and speak to parents by email in a more compelling way.
Okay, our second issue is the teacher diversity gap. In our interviews, there's been a common theme: representation mattering and more students needing to see themselves in classrooms. Nationally, according to the National Center of Education statistics, more than 80% of teachers are white, leaving Black, Asian, Native American, and Hispanic teachers at the minority of the teaching population. The premise that most teachers are white even as schools are more diverse is certainly true across the country. Sitting in a classroom helmed by a teacher of color can have significant positive impacts on students of color. According to a report from Education Week, Black students, especially Black young men from low-income households, are more likely to both graduate from high school and enroll in college when they have just one Black teacher in elementary school. While Broward may have better diversity representation than other regions, we can always do better. We applaud the significant professional development opportunities for educators. They are plentiful. And we agree that cultural sensitivity and cultural awareness is very important to be able to relate to students from different backgrounds. During our interviews, we often heard that there is also a short supply of students of color entering the teaching field. Many teachers of color, if they do elect to become teachers, are concentrating in hard to staff schools serving high poverty communities where there can also often be a lack of resources and support. And this comes from a past interview. You can find this in an Ed Week article published on May 4th, 2021. Alrighty, so we have two near-term recommendations that can be implemented to help solve this issue. The first one is to continue to encourage teachers, schools, staff, and decision makers to be diversity trained. We would like to see Broward schools be the best of class example for the nation in addressing diversity and equity. Our second recommendation is to pilot a program having teachers of color speak to students about the value and impact of being a teacher. In an Education Week interview with 3 Black male educators, we learned a few things that really seemed to resonate with them. They suggested Black teachers speak to students about becoming teachers, tapping into their activism, tapping into their sense of justice and fairness, and say, hey, if you have a great teacher, pay it forward. Or if you had a great teacher, pay it forward. Educator Raymond Roy Pace has started a national Why I Teach tour, visiting high schools and colleges to speak to Black youth about becoming teachers, particularly Black young men. So our suggestion for this pilot program might be a great and fairly easy way to introduce more students sooner to the value of becoming a teacher.
We have joined the national conversation about the teaching of history. One of our recommendations is to amend the way American and world history courses are taught. We hope it is clear that there are clear gaps in most history curricula. We need to ensure that the information students receive about history is inclusive and more comprehensively reflects all people who played important roles in our history. This requires that we understand the current gaps to ultimately approach the Florida Department of Education for revisiting and revising current history standards. We also appreciate the autonomy of the teacher in the classroom. We celebrate our teachers and appreciate the culturally responsive teaching that is encouraged. It is essential. Some of our near-term goals include having more students participate in providing public comments on the state's suggested history standard revisions as they arise, and committing to educator diversity training, as stated earlier. We also suggest that the development of a list of robust complementary resources for history teachers, and finally, an analysis of the content of history textbooks to identify any gaps in history that have been left out. We hope over the longer term to improve history standards, working alongside the Florida Department of Education to help close the gaps in current curricula. In addition, our suggestion long-term is to integrate the curriculum from elective history classes into the required history class, and even exploring alternative course options such as AP Human Geography, which teaches learning from the human perspective rather than a European-centric one.
So that covers our big 3 issues and the recommendations that follow with them. But another important part is that we need to ensure student involvement in making these recommendations a reality. Therefore, we are proposing that high school and high school equivalent institutions adopt a new program titled Equity Ambassadors. For the school district, that means that we are asking for 1, assistance with setting up EA programs at interested schools and recruiting students. Second, we need the funding necessary to reward student leaders who go above and beyond within Bridge to Life EA ambassadors. 3, a time slot at school board workshop meetings for EAs to share the many lived experiences of inequity. And 4, for the teams working on our suggested pilot studies to meet quarterly with EAs to provide the student perspective.
So our inspiration comes from the work that the Brace Cadets have done. And we believe that by training students in a similar manner about equity, we will find encouraging results. As the director of the school counseling, Ralph Aiello, said when talking about the Brace Cadets, the coalition of the willing should include the students. Their voice amplifies far greater than ours. B2L's EAs will work alongside their school's equity liaison to do many things, including continuing informational interviews with thought leaders, required monthly meeting check-ins at B2L meetings, presenting equity topics and lived experience on a regular basis at school board workshop meetings, taking diversity and inclusion training, and lastly, certainly meeting with the equity liaisons at their school. We hope we can connect more closely with equity liaisons moving forward. I see we have several this morning today. Ultimately, students will have a robust opportunities for leadership positions, for being involved in communication and social media campaigns and more. And as we mentioned before, our pilot studies. EAs would also act as the reviewer for quarterly progress updates from the school's district and provide the student perspective. This, of course, is dependent on the approval to pursue the pilot research studies.
While the benefits of creating a more equitable environment for students is evident, there are many benefits for students directly involved in this work. This includes service hours, public speaking experience, mentorship and networking, leadership opportunities, project management skill building, resume building, and collective impact experience. We are also asking that the school board agree to budget $500 to 10 participating EA leaders who meet certain requirements by the end of the school year.
And the slide is for our interested students, excuse me. We will have a meeting before school starts in the fall to go through the process of organizing the Equity Ambassador team for next school year. Interested students who apply by following the steps on this slide will hear back from us by the beginning of August. For adults, we need the support of adults to help uplift our voices. We ask that you help us to make the necessary changes to our education system for the betterment of our society as a whole. Teachers, I know that you know a student who cares about this kind of work, so please be sure to direct them to us so they can get involved. Follow B2L on social media platforms such as Instagram or Twitter and help spread the word about the work we are doing. No one person or group can truly succeed until we all do, which is why we are calling out to you to help us bring our vision to life. Here is a quick little sizzle reel I put together explaining the work we do as racial equity advisory leaders.
Ms. Lockwood, you may need to unmute so we can hear it.
Is the work you do difficult? The work we do is challenging, but we do it because we do not want to see racism in education.
The purpose of these interviews is to examine the ways that we can eliminate racism in public schools. We will be sharing our findings in multiple ways on multiple platforms.
And I think ultimately it'll be you young people that really show us the way in changing a lot of the paradigms that our country has.
Being anti-racist means that we're going to have many customized experiences and responses and solutions. And so we have to get comfortable with the many.
We have 8 recommendations that include a strong emphasis on data-driven solutions. We have the power and the support to drive lasting change in our education system. Will you be a part of that change?
Thank you for that amazing sizzle reel, Chad. And thank you to all of you for listening to us today. Us youth have the power to create lasting change in our public school systems. And we hope that you guys will support this important work and help us create this change. So again, thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And I see all the love in the chat. Thank you. So this is the part where I said earlier where we can talk a little bit about GSU's example, and specifically we're going to listen to some of this podcast just because it is really amazing what they're doing. And so to be able to get a better idea of that, we can have perspective into what the future might look like for Broward County Public Schools when it comes to closing the achievement gap for students.
While we're getting that set up, or if that's getting set up, we can just move on to one thing. We also talked about intersectionality, and it is popped up right now, and Ms. Lockwood's got it ready to go. So we'll just listen to that right now. Excuse me.
Welcome to Talking About Cities, the podcast that connects you with leading innovators working to revitalize cities across America. We talk to the thinkers and doers, the researchers and leaders facing the challenges and celebrating the promise of cities today. I'm your host, Carol Collette of the Kresge Foundation, and today we are talking with Dr. Tim Rennick, who is leading an education miracle at Georgia State University, where students of color and first-generation students are graduating at unprecedented rates. Using predictive analytics, Georgia State is closing the very stubborn achievement gap. Dr. Rennick is Georgia State's Senior Vice President for Student Success. Georgia State's success rate at graduating unlikely students is outstanding. Tell me what you've achieved.
Well, we've made some dramatic transformations at Georgia State over the last decade. About 12, 13 years ago, our graduation rate was hovering around 30%, and we were a classic example of achievement gaps. Our white students outperformed our students of color. Our middle and upper income students outperformed our low income students. You could depend on that every semester. That's just the way it would be. And what we've been able to do in the last decade is really turn things around. Overall, we've raised our graduation rates by 22 percentage points, but even bigger increases for underserved populations. So our graduation rates for our African American students have almost doubled over that time period. For African American males, they've tripled over that time period. For our Latino students, they've almost tripled over that time period. So what's interesting about the Georgia State story is, one, that these kind of transformations can occur, but two, they occurred not in the expected or at least the conventional fashion. That typically what campuses have done in order to address low graduation rates for African American males is create very targeted programs just for African American males. What Georgia State has done is very different. We've looked at problems that our student body is facing, addressed them at scale, meaning that we've changed the way the university interacts with all students with regard to the issue. And there we've seen the graduation rates improve by leaps and bounds. And probably our most interesting distinctions over this time period, we no longer have achievement gaps based on race, ethnicity, or income level. For each of the last 3 years, our Black, our Latino, our first generation, and our low income students have all graduated at or above the rate of the student body overall. So those achievement gaps are gone. And for each of the last 5 years now, we've conferred more bachelor's degrees to African American students than any other nonprofit college or university in the United States.
That's startling and impressive. How did you do it?
What we've done, in essence, is take a hard look at ourselves. It's so easy in the post-secondary world, especially when you're serving students who come to you without the greatest preparation academically, to point fingers, to blame K through 12 not teaching strong enough math and reading skills, to blame our state legislators for not funding us fully in higher education. And clearly there are problems in those areas. Over the last decade, while we're making these gains, our incoming SAT scores dropped by 33%. 3 points, and our state appropriations dropped by more than $40 million. So those are real issues. But what we've done at Georgia State is really hold up a mirror to ourselves, ask the question, how are we part of the problem? How are we contributing to the fact that as of 15 years ago, 7 out of 10 students who came to Georgia State were leaving with debt and no degree or credential to show for it? And what we did is become a lot more data savvy. Even as we were losing state appropriations, we invested in data to analyze ourselves, to look at what was tripping up our students, to run pilots and then track data to see what interventions were most effective, and then to use the data to help us efficiently scale interventions across the whole student body. We're doing things now that I personally didn't think possible when I took over this position 10 years ago. We're tracking every single Georgia State student. We have over 40,000 undergraduates enrolled every semester, every single undergraduate student every day for about 800 risk factors. We're looking at historical data to determine what trips up students, what kind of mistakes do they make that precede them getting into academic difficulty and dropping out? What are the early warning signs 6 months, 9 months, 12 months before a student drops out? We found about 800 different indices, different indicators that show when a student is beginning to get off track. And now we're tracking every student every day for every one of those 800 risk factors. If one is identified, we intervene within 48 hours. So we're correcting problems when they first emerge rather than when it's too late and the student has already gone well off path and has 1 foot out the door as far as dropping out.
800 risk factors, that seems overwhelming. Where do the inputs come from?
Well, most of what we're tracking are the kind of data that every university has and tracks on a day-to-day basis. We're just finally using these data to empower our students. So we're using really the electronic profile of our students that our student information systems collect each and every day. What courses is a student registered for? What major do they have? What grades are they getting in these courses? What we found, even by this very basic data that, as I say, every college and university across the United States collects on a daily basis, we can advise the students in powerful ways. For instance, we found that for our accounting majors, they need to perform very well in their first math course. The prerequisite rules in our age-old academic policies say a student needs a minimum grade of a C in their introductory math course to be eligible or to meet the prerequisite for taking an introductory accounting course. But when we ran 10 years of historical data, literally hundreds of thousands of student records, we found that the data show that a student really needs closer to a B plus in their first math course to have an 80% chance of passing that introductory accounting course. So now if a student is an accounting major and gets below a B plus in their first math course, an alert goes off and there's an intervention. The idea is let's get the student who wants to be an accounting major math help before they begin taking accounting courses, collecting D's and F's, which they can't afford either academically, or if they're a low-income student, they can't afford financially either to be using precious aid eligibility for courses that don't advance them closer to the major. You know, we call our whole approach GPS advising, and for us it stands for graduation and progression success, but it's clearly an intentional play on the GPS in your car. And we think the systems work very similarly. You know, in the old days, before GPS in your car, you would make a wrong turn, and if you didn't realize it for 20 or 30 minutes, you were so far off track, it took forever to get back onto your route and get to your destination.
Wow, that was amazing. And it's just really amazing what GSU has been able to do. And of course, it's going to look different for Broward County Public Schools when we do get to a point where we can implement something like this. But so I see someone's asking if there are any universities in Florida currently doing this. I cannot tell you specifically, but I would imagine that some may be doing something like that. And if you want to hear more about this podcast and listen to the whole thing, I just sent the link in there into the chat here. So please do listen to that. It's very encouraging. And I'm so glad that we got to share that with you and bring this to you all and show you that there is a possibility to give targeted help to students with data.
Thank you, Hailey. And so as Chad touched on a little bit earlier, we need to stress the importance of intersectionality. There's many different ways racism is experienced, and we need to be very comfortable with the many. Sue Gallagher from CSC once said, "It is better to have a salad than a melting pot." It's okay to see the differences. In fact, it's very important that we do, but we're recommending that the school district prioritize the broader understanding and education and appreciation of the wide variety of racism that is experienced from each intersectionality. For example, Latinx, Caribbean American, and the Black LGBTQ youth. So as you can see on the slide here, we would like to echo the shared experience of intersectionality at staff meetings. This would entail identifying articles, podcasts, research, books that they want to discuss, or bring their own story of lived experience to get comfortable with that many of intersectionality.
All right. Just going to go over briefly how our meetings, how our interviews would run and what questions we asked. So in our early interviews, we asked our interviewees 4 key questions that are currently displayed on the current slide, which were, what are your 3 recommendations on how we can eliminate inequities in public education? What are pragmatic ways we can implement those recommendations? What can we, the youth, do? And who else should we speak with? And these questions were these questions gave our interviewees a wide range of ideas to discuss with us. And these questions were also crucial in us developing and formulating our interviewees' ideas into a set of recommendations that you have seen today. And we invite you to take a look at these questions and think about them as we move forward with our, we can call this the after party of the presentation. So just think about those questions.
During our informational interviews, us students answered one of the 3 questions listed to share a little bit more about ourselves. And now we would like you to answer one of the 3 questions. And if you could type your answer in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated.
And just so you all could get a little bit of background on us, I think that we should share our answers to one of the questions as well. So I will start and I will answer the first question. And if you can't see the questions on the screen, hopefully everybody will answer different questions so you can put your response to the question in the chat. And I will answer the first question, which is, why is fighting in racism important to me? I think it's important because, like Sue Gallagher said, it's in our country's DNA. And I think that it's really important to just get this idea of superiority or this group is better than this group. We just need to get rid of this idea and acknowledge the fact that everybody is human. We bleed the same blood. So I just think that racism is just something that shouldn't exist. And I personally want to be a part of the movement that eliminates racism once and for all in this country, because I feel as if it's just been going on for too long. It's just something that I personally have such disagreement towards. And yeah, that's my personal, I feel like I could go on and ramble on, but that's my personal little answer to why fighting racism is important to me. And we will have somebody else answer another question.
So I will go ahead and answer the second question here. Why do you think it's important to have these interviews / conversations? And I think it's because as individuals, we don't know everything. We see everything through a lens which has been constructed with how we were raised, where we grew up, what we've been taught in schools even. And so just by asking other people what they think, and that's exactly what we're doing here. I'm loving seeing this and seeing everyone's responses. and just getting an idea of what everyone else's lived experiences are really can help us build better solutions that are going to help us a lot more than if just one person sat down and was like, I'm going to fix racism, you know, I'm going to end it, and I'm going to do it my way. You know, it's not going to work as effectively. But yeah, I think it's just so important to have these conversations, and thank you for listening to us and sharing your answers to these questions with us. So Samantha, if you'd like to go, I know you have a really good answer to one of these.
Yeah, I do. It's so hard to choose which question to answer. But just to touch on two a little bit, why I think it's important. I mentioned in my introduction that we shouldn't avoid conversations about race, because when we do, we allowed ourselves to be fooled that it doesn't exist. And we should not be avoiding conflict or uncomfortable conversations, because it can create huge blind spots to the largest issues in our society. And I'm gonna kind of answer question number 3. Our communication as young adults, young students, we communicate through social media. And I believe that's the best and most effective way to spread awareness and spread what's going on, reach, you know, the initiative that we're doing now. You see, even within our application, we said that communication to students is best through our social platforms. So that's my way of continuing my fight against injustice throughout my life and reaching that younger crowd. And I will pass the baton to Yewande.
Thank you. I will answer the third question. What is one way you plan to continue your fight against injustice throughout your life? Just by continuing having these type of conversations with people, I think the more knowledge that we gain and the more that we share, and we get all these experiences, and that's how we figure out how do we diminish and eliminate issues such as racism. And especially, I think, having conversations with our youth. There's so much information that I and the other students on this call have been exposed to, and that we know from doing our interviews and doing research, but a lot of our peers don't know this information. And I think if we have these conversations from a younger age, as we grow up, we know how to better ourselves and better our society. And like Hailey and the others have said before, I'm looking at the chat and there's like amazing answers. Thank you so much for engaging with us.
Very quickly, before we close out, I want to ask Ms. Lockwood if you could go back to the slide for how students can get involved. And I just want to encourage everyone to take a picture of that slide. So either yourself as a student, so you can follow these steps to get involved with us, or as an educator, if you can share that with the young people in your life who you think would really enjoy being a part of that work right here. So yeah, so we will get back to you and we will have a full step process in how we are going to start equity ambassadors once it's all approved. But yeah, so we'll just take a moment on this slide so you can get that in. Yep, perfect.
All right, so we would like to thank you again for staying for our little epilogue, and thank you for listening to us today. As you've already heard, we have the power to create change in our public school system, and we have the power to impact our country as a whole and better the society as a whole. And we strongly hope that you will support this important work and help create this change. And that is all we have for you today. Thank you all so much. We appreciate every single one of you who are on the call today. Thank you so much for listening to what us racial equity advisors had to say today.
Well, absolutely snap it up for these amazing students. Let's share some love in the chat. I'm gonna tell you what, Mr. Hickman. I thought I was with a group of college educators. I'm telling you what. I mean, the professionalism, the acumen, then the knowledge base. Please share some love with these young people. You are doing a spectacular job. I can't wait. I'm going to follow you guys and see our worlds. Hey, Mr. Hickman, you want to say something?
I would like to, if you don't mind.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. So I just wanted to commend the students and commend Ms. Lockwood for the work that she's doing with these students and Broward College. I do appreciate the conversation and the recommendations we'll take seriously. It's been a great conversation throughout the past few weeks. Dr. Osgood has, presented that she did meet with you in your videos and is interested in letting the school board hear your concerns and your ideas. As the Chief of Student Support Initiatives and Recovery, I'm looking forward to working with you to further the work to close the achievement gap and to improve race relations as needed. We have other members on the call who are not necessarily on the on this side of the Zoom, but they are participants and they echo those sentiments. So thank you, and thanks to the cabinet members who are present for today's session.
Mr. Hickman, you can let me know if we need to let someone come in who really wants to say something. You know the list better than I do, but if there is a board member or a chief that wants to come in and say something, if you'll just chat it, Mr. Hickman, you can help me out if you see them chat it, and I will let them in if someone really wants to say something. I think it's a great time if anybody wants to share. I would love that. So if you can help me out, Mr. Hickman, if you see anyone. So again,
thank you.
Okay, but thank you so much, Mr. Hickman, for speaking on behalf of the administration and the district and the chiefs and everything. And we appreciate you and the work that you're doing. Again, kudos to you all. Kudos to you. Amazing job. And again, Colleen, great work with these young people. And of course, it's being recorded. So we will have this session. We will have a recording of it. All right, everyone. It's